Okay, so good afternoon and shalom and nice to meet you. My name is Nir Menusi. I'll tell you just 2 words about myself, where I come from and what brought me here. I was born in Israel. I was born in a very, very Western secular family. Didn't know hardly anything about my Jewish roots and the Jewish religion. Also a very modern secular home means not too much into religion in general. Then when I was about 25, when I was in the university in Jerusalem, I started opening up to spirituality in general, and then got to know a little bit about religions and study religions. And gradually my journey brought me to my own spiritual home, which is Judaism, and I began to study very intensely Torah. Torah is, of course, the general term for the accumulating Jewish wisdom, beginning with the divine revelation of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses, the first part of the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, and it also refers, the word Torah, to all the wisdom that grows out of the original revelation. And gradually I also became a teacher, and I belong to a branch of Judaism called Chassidut or Hasidism, which is an 18th century, you can say, Jewish revival movement that wanted to bring back the old spark of divine passion and deep connection to what you learn, what you do. And within Chassidut, I belong to a branch called Chabad, and this is my first time in India and first time in Rishikesh, and I came here for 2 months with my wife and family. We have 5 children together, and we're here at Zohar's Bet Chabad, which is very close, and this is the first attempt, at least on my part, to try and give a Kabbalah class in English, open to everyone who's interested. That's it. So we'll begin. We'll begin by asking ourselves, or asking the question, what exactly is Kabbalah? Oh, better. So before we understand the word Kabbalah, we have to look a little bit into the word and see what the word means. But before, we have to give a broader definition or introduction to what it means, where it comes from. Also the briefest of histories of Kabbalah. So Kabbalah, generally speaking, is the Jewish mystical tradition or the Jewish esoteric tradition. Judaism, as you probably know, is a very ancient religion. It starts in the 18th century BC with the first patriarch described in the Bible, Abraham. And he is traditionally the first monotheist, or the first to acknowledge that there is one force behind all the various energies and forces operating in the universe, in the cosmos. And he realized that the meaning of this is that we need to transcend idolatry and go beyond it. And from his journey, it was transmitted to his son and his grandson, and gradually they gave birth to the Jewish people. The Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt, and then when they were freed by Moses in what is probably the most famous story of all time, the Exodus, the coming out of Egypt, filmed several times, they received the Torah in Mount Sinai, in the Egyptian desert, in the Sinai desert. And this is the official beginning of the Jewish religion. A great deal of what Jews do is study very deeply and intensely and to great detail the text of the Torah. This was actually not from the very beginning. For about a millennium and a half, it was all prophecy. There were prophets, and the prophets would give direct knowledge of God, but then prophecy faded out after the first Jewish temple was destroyed, and then the age of wisdom, it's called, the age of prophecy, faded out, like I said, and the age of wisdom dawned. And the age of wisdom was a very deep, intense study of the Torah, and all the very broad library of Jewish books came out of this study and are still coming out of this study. So there we have the written Torah, which is the Tanakh, the Bible, and then there's the oral Torah, which is all the transmitted wisdom, which is gradually also being written down. But there is another level to the Torah, which was flowing, so to speak, beneath the surface. There was a hidden tradition, a hidden wisdom. It's traditionally dated back to the first patriarch, to Abraham. And then there are several landmarks of people who expanded upon it, each one making a quantum leap of expansion. But it was hidden. It was only for a precious few people. It wasn't publicized to the Jewish people, and of course it wasn't publicized even beyond it, because even most Jews didn't know about it. And this received or transmitted hidden tradition is called Kabbalah. And the first meaning of Kabbalah, in a few minutes I'll give you a broader definition of this word, but the simplest meaning means received wisdom, something that is received and transmitted. So the first earliest, now a brief history, the first earliest book of Kabbalah, a very short, cryptical, deep book, is called Sefer Yetzirah, the book of Yetzirah, and that is attributed to Abraham himself. So first I write this 3 letters, and they mean with God's help. So before we write down anything on a page or on a whiteboard, we first ask God's help, that we don't make a mistake and that we say truthful things and that no error comes through our words. So the first book of Kabbalah is called Sefer Yetzirah, which means the book of formation. That is the formation of the world. And it's attributed to Abraham. It was passed down, and then in a much later period of time, a very important sage, after the destruction of the temple and the disappearance of prophecy, then the first wise men were called Tanaim. They were the first of the Jewish sages. The Mishnah, the Talmud, is the collection of their writings, the writings of the sages, the Jewish sages. In Hebrew we call them Chazal. And a very important sage was called Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And the acronym shortly is Rashbi. Rashbi. And his book, you may have heard of it, it's called the Zohar. The book of Zohar, which means in English, splendor, or glowing light. If the book of formation was a very tiny and cryptic book with many, many interpretations, the book of Zohar is a very, very big book. And it goes over the different parts of the Torah and expands upon them in a completely new language. Instead of talking about the people and the stories and the literal meaning or even the regular allegorical meaning, it goes into the hidden world. It talks about there being hidden worlds, souls, angels, demons, journeys of the soul, different divine emanations. All these are described in great details, but in a very incoherent. Different sections make sense, but it's very hard to see a whole cosmology, so to speak, from the Zohar. The Zohar is very poetic, very colorful. It has very, very beautiful images about how God carved the world out of an infinite light, and all these very beautiful images. and different colors of light, shades of light, talks about all these hidden realities that nobody can see, and we can see why it was hidden. It wasn't for everyone. And it's not just Rashbi, it's actually Rashbi and his son and 8 more pupils. It's a group of 10 people sitting together alone. They were also would study the regular wisdom, and they would write down, but they would also go to the mountains or to a cave or to a room, and they would sit together, and each one would give his inspired teaching. And it all revolves around verses that everyone can read in the Torah, but it's as if they see it and they see something hidden beneath it. And when you learn it, it makes sense, but you would never see it on your own. So everything is symbolic of inner, deeper things. Fast forward about another millennium and a half to the 16th century.
Excuse me, what era was that Zohar attributed?
So the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in the 1st century AD. And now we're fast forwarding to the 16th century. And in the city of Tzfat or Safed in Israel, in the Galilee, if you go to Israel, it's a very, very beautiful city. And one of the first things people would point to you is the cemetery where many holy Jewish souls are buried. And one of them is called the Arizal, or the Ari. It's an acronym. His name was Rabbi Isaac Luria. Rabbi Isaac Luria. So his Kabbalah, in the academic world, they call it Lurianic Kabbalah. In the more religious tradition, it's called the Kabbalah of the Arizal. Arizal means the divine Rabbi Isaac. May he be of blessed memory. So the short is the Arizal, and the Arizal wrote many books. He didn't write them, his pupils wrote them, but the main book, we'll put down the main book is called Etz Chaim. Etz Chaim, that means the tree of life. Tree of life. And it was written by the Arizal, or simply the Ari. We'll put it down as this. That's another quantum leap. The Arizal systematized the Zohar. He gave a very, very complex, very detailed, very beautiful description of how all the different hidden worlds are interconnected and also inter-included, a bit like a fractal or a holography, that every image is inter-included within one another, that all the different sephirot, it's called, the divine emanations, are embedded one within another. And then when you have all these different scales of understanding, all the different parts of the Zohar, and not just the Zohar, generally all the Jewish literature suddenly can make sense within this very grand cosmology. But still, it was only for a precious few people. It was only for the souls that felt that they were called upon to learn this special esoteric wisdom. The Ari was a prodigy beyond understanding. All of his knowledge, all of his wisdom was accumulated. He died when he was 38 years old. And he transmitted his knowledge between the age of 36 and 38. That all the pupils that wrote down his books, they knew him in the last 2 years of his life when he came to Safed, to Tzfat. He came there when he was 36, he had 2 years, and in those 2 years he transmitted everything he knew and learned before. And when today we talk about studying Kabbalah, we talk about the Kabbalah of the Ari. This is what we're going to learn in these few meetings. The final stage, 4th stage, is 200 years later, in the 18th century. And this is the founding of the movement of Chassidut. Chassidut was founded by, there's no one book, there are several books, but the person here is the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov. And his innovation was he realized that the world is becoming more and more secular and is being distanced from the acknowledgement of divinity and being connected to the soul, and people are becoming more and more materialistic. And he saw the Jewish people, but he beyond it he saw the entire world becoming secularized and modernized and made more materialistic and only seeing this world because of the dawning of science and the Enlightenment. And he was a little bit before that. He lived in the early 18th century, before the French Revolution. But the seeds were already there, and he recognized it, and he realized that without revealing the Kabbalah, then first and foremost the Jewish people would be lost. They would lose touch with their own faith because it would seem superficial to them, external, either very cerebral or very practical, but not something that touches your emotions and your soul and the depth of your own being. And he realized it's time to reveal the Kabbalah. However, the Kabbalah is so complex and so high and so complicated and dense and intricate and hard to understand. So he came up with this solution, and the solution was to take the most basic of concepts in Kabbalah and to translate them from a mystical language to what we can call a psychological language. The language of the psyche, the language of the soul, the language of the heart. He said because Kabbalah is the inner dimension of the Torah, learning the Kabbalah would awaken the inner dimension of us, of the students. If we study just the stories and the laws, then it touches the more superficial levels of us. If we study the deeper interpretations, we go deeper. If we study the deepest interpretations, we'll find the deepest core within ourselves, and it would suddenly be able to emerge. So although the language is very unintuitive, it's very strange and abstract, in a way it strikes a chord in the soul deeper and more resonant than the regular, normal, rational language of the hidden level, of the revealed levels of the Torah. And we can sense, and you'll see it very soon, I hope, that although these are abstract notions, they strike a very deep chord within us. So this is a brief history of Kabbalah. I defined Kabbalah as the hidden level or the hidden layer of the Torah, the deepest level of interpretation. So another term we have to get to know here is now two things. We want to get a better understanding of what Kabbalah is before we jump into the first concepts. So, there's a very old phrase within the Talmud that describes the Torah as an orchard or orchard. Right? You say orchard? Orchard. And the orchard in Hebrew is pardes. And it's not by a coincidence, it's similar to the word paradise. Paradise was a garden, the Garden of Eden. Pardes and paradise are cognate words, and paradise may have come from the ancient word of pardes. And the four consonants of paradise are the same, P-R-D-S. So pardes is an acronym according to the Jewish tradition. So we write it down like this, Pardes. The first word P, the first letter P, refers to a word in Hebrew called Pshat. Pshat means the literal meaning. The literal, simple, external level that everyone can see and read, and a child can read the story and understand the story. The second word that starts with an R is remez. Remez is like a hint, when you hint at something hidden, and we can call this level the allegorical level. Allegorical. The D is drash. Drash is the homiletical level, that is the level of deeper interpretations that expand upon the written text and show all the different ideas that are laying out behind it. It's much more expansive in scope. Homiletical level. And then finally, we have the word sod. Sod is secret. Sod, you whisper a sod in Hebrew. Sod is secret, and this is the esoteric level. Esoteric level. There's a story about 4 sages who entered the Pardes, entered the orchard, and 3 of them didn't make it out in one piece. One of them became crazy, one of them became a heretic, one of them died, and only one of them, the famous Rabbi Akiva, came in peace and came out in peace. And the Pardes is all the levels, but more than it especially means the deepest level, the level of Sod. They went into the depth of the Pardes. The depth of the Pardes is the deepest level of the Sod, the secret, the esoteric level. And 3 great sages didn't make it out completely whole. They were damaged in some way. Because if you don't understand it properly, then it's hard to do it. And the best explanation for why Rabbi Akiva made it out in peace, peace with the A, P-E-A-C, but also in one piece, is that it said that he came in peace and he came out in peace. And the explanation is that he came into it knowing and deciding and with a resolution to come out of it. The other 3 didn't. They dived in, but some part of their soul wanted to get lost in the secrets, get lost in the spiritual realms. But for Rabbi Akiva, and this is a very basic Jewish principle you can say, is that the whole purpose of all this grand spirituality and knowledge or enlightenment or realization of God's wisdom, it's not meant to be something that is disconnected from practical physical reality. After learning all these deep things, we want to go back to our lives, we want to go back to the practical world, to reality, and to implement it. And only Rabbi Akiva made this resolution beforehand. He knew, I'm going in there. It's a little bit like when you fly a kite, but you need to have a wire that connects the kite to the ground. If the wire is lost, or a helium balloon, then the helium balloon or the kite would float up and disappear from this world, or go crazy, or become a heretic. So the Sod is the deepest. We actually should have written this from the bottom up. The Pshat is the lowest level, and it's a ladder that you climb up. But this is also okay because it's also, each level is deeper than the ones before it. So it feels like we're going deeper and deeper. So Kabbalah is the final level. This is Kabbalah, the esoteric level, the deepest understanding of every story and law and word of wisdom within the Torah is finally, ultimately explained in Kabbalah. And before that, we have a feeling of much wisdom and much knowledge, but it doesn't feel that it connects. And very interestingly, the final letter, S, in Hebrew, it's shaped like a circle. The other letters don't. It's shaped like one circle. This is the letter S in Hebrew, is a circle. So the idea is that when we have the first 3 levels, we have a feeling of something disjointed. And the word PRD, pered, is the root of disjointing. So together with the S, it's Pardes, it's paradise. But without the S, we have a feeling that we're getting lost with one idea and another idea and another idea. They're all disconnected. It's disconnection. But the Samech gathers all the elements, puts them around one circle, one structure, unifies them, and shows how everything is unified. Now, one last introduction, and then we're going to dive into some actual Kabbalistic concepts, is the meaning of the word Kabbalah. The meaning. I said one meaning before, received wisdom. But we have to give the full meaning. And the full meaning is that Kabbalah means actually three things. So in Hebrew, this is how the word looks like. Ka-ba-la. And the root is the three letters K-B-L. K-B-L. Right, Hebrew goes from right to left. And this is just closes up the word, the final letter. So the root is KBL, Kabbal. And Kabbalah has three meanings. And only when we understand fully the three meanings do we really get can we really grasp what Kabbalah is all about. So the first meaning, like we said, is to receive from above. To receive. There is something, a little bit of the prophecy within Kabbalah. Prophecy is not just about the future. Prophecy is hidden knowledge about the present also. Understanding the deeper level of things, it doesn't come from the rational mind. We have to put a little bit our mind aside and stand in front of these concepts and try and receive them. We have to become a vessel. We have to open up. And then the light of the Kabbalistic wisdom can reside within the vessel that we have opened up. And the vessel receiving something, this is the first meaning, to receive. The second meaning, very different, means to correspond, to show correspondence between parallel phenomena. Parallel lines in Hebrew is makbilot, the same root. So Kabbalah is also the root of to correspond or to show parallels. Why is this? And in fact, this is the original meaning of the root in the Torah. In the Torah, it only appears in this sense. When we have different phenomena and we want to see that they're connected, then we can see a similarity. That's one stage. But a deeper stage is to show that the similarity exists also in the level of details. The detail A in one thing corresponds to detail X in something else, and detail B corresponds to Y, and detail C corresponds to Z. So for example, if I want to understand how the soul is built, and I want to make a correspondence between levels of the soul or forces within myself, and I correspond them to another structure, let's say a structure of something about nature, like how a tree grows. A tree has roots, and then a trunk, and then branches, and then leaves and fruit. And if I make an exact correspondence that the roots correspond to one level of my psyche, and the trunk to another, and the branches to another, and the fruit to another, then suddenly I have two models, two systems, and they can explain one another. I have a better understanding of each of them because I made a correspondence between the details. And much of Kabbalah has to do with taking different models and corresponding them and then see what happens. And the more you correspond different phenomena, the more you see that they parallel one another and they have similar structures, and the structures repeat themselves in different places, then a greater feeling of unity emerges out of this experience. And the different aspects of your life and the different aspects of what you've learned in your life, they become connected. This is the idea. And this is the opposite of receiving from above, because when you correspond something, you also integrate it into your life. You learn something new, this is received, you haven't heard it before. But then there are other things that you already know and that are part of you and a part of your personality. And when you make these connections and you tie the images of tying a hook and a lula'a, how do you say lula'a? Loop. A loop. Yeah. A loop and a hook, and you put them together. You tie like in old buttons, And the more you tie your buttons and you connect the different things, then the wisdom is integrated into your own intelligence, your own psyche, your own understanding. So here you're not standing and receiving from above, you're integrating into your own psyche. The final meaning, very similar to receive, is to accept. This also is one of the meanings of Kabbalah, and it's specifically used in terms of my heart accepts something. It sits within my heart. And I feel that I know it. I feel that I'm connected to it. I feel that, oh, it clicks. So when things are accepted and not just received, it's almost the opposite of receiving, because when you receive, you don't understand. And then you start to understand by corresponding. And finally, after much thought and meditation and integration, suddenly you say, oh wow, now it makes sense. Now finally, I feel that I understand this. And so the idea is that Kabbalah, although it's the highest, the deepest level of the Pardes, it's the most esoteric one, it's the most mystical one, eventually, if you go through this long process, you'll see that it integrates, it sits within your heart more than the more superficial or external layers of the Torah and of Judaism. So it doesn't appear to be that way at the start. It appears to be the very opposite. It appears to be very strange and weird and distant. But if you go down that road, you see that it would make the most sense in the end. It would be, you'll feel you accept it more than the less deep layers. Okay. So this is just a prelude. This is just to get a little bit of sense of where we're at and what Kabbalah means, and a tiny bit of its history. Now we want to start with a very, very simple, the most basic of Kabbalistic concepts, which also raises a very basic and deep question. And the concept goes like this, and I'll erase the whiteboard again. What is the first word or words of Genesis? Everyone knows it. In the beginning, Bereshit. Yeah. So in Hebrew it's Bereshit. Bereshit in Hebrew is written like this: Be-re-shit, and in English, Bereshit. In Greek it was Genesis. Bereshit. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Of course, of course. Now, the first letter, Bet, is actually the second letter of the alphabet. The alphabet is the first two letters of Hebrew, which were then adopted by Greece. And the word alphabet comes from the first two letters in Hebrew, Aleph and Bet, or in Greek, Alpha and Beta. So Bet, the first word of Bereshit, the first word, the first letter of the Torah, is actually the second letter of the alphabet. Now each letter has a numerical value. The first letter Aleph is 1, the second letter B, Bet, is 2. So the Torah starts with the letter B, which signifies 2, or duality. The duality of creator and creation, the duality of the heavens and the earth, which are the first things to be created. Now this is very puzzling, and the sages have puzzled over this greatly, because it would seem to make more sense for the Torah to open with the first letter. Why? Because the Torah wants to bring to the world the notion of monotheism. It comes into a world of idolatry that says that there are many different gods, and the greatest revelation of Abraham was that there's one God, and that's the whole point of the story is how these people realize that there's one God and begin to serve Him. And in fact, it would be very easy to start with the letter Aleph, because the first sentence is, in the beginning God created, and the word for God in Hebrew begins with Aleph. And in Hebrew, you can change the order. It doesn't matter grammatically. You can say, God, instead of in the beginning God created, you could have said God created in the beginning. It would have started with the word God. It would have started with Aleph, with one, with oneness. And it would seem to be simpler and more elegant. But it starts with B. Now there are many explanations, but one of the explanations is that it hints at the fact that it's not really the beginning. Although the word is in the beginning, it doesn't refer to the real beginning. The real beginning is before. And the fact that we start with the second letter is supposed to make you wonder, wait, so where's the Aleph hidden behind the letter B? And in fact, the word Aleph itself, when you read it differently, when you read it from the end to the beginning, when you reverse the order of it becomes the word Pele. Aleph becomes Pele. Pele means hidden. So there is a hidden Aleph. There is an Aleph that is Pele, that is hidden behind the letter B. And it waits for people to search for it. And this is exactly what the Kabbalah does. The Kabbalah wants to reveal the hidden Aleph, the hidden oneness, beneath the apparent duality of the Torah, which talks in the language of creation and creator as two separate entities. So it starts with the creator creating the creation, but then it refers to them as two different things. There's the world and there's God, there's creation and creator. And this is the duality of the first B bit of the Torah. But Kabbalah wants to reveal the hidden Aleph, the hidden unity. So the Kabbalah wants to tell the prequel to Genesis. The prequel to Genesis is what happened before. And the prequel to Genesis begins with the concept of Ohr Ein Sof. And this is the first Kabbalistic concept we want to learn. Ohr Ein Sof means infinite light. Or means light. Ein means without or not having. And Sof means end. Sorry?
Endless.
Endless light, or boundless light, or limitless light, or light without end. And interestingly, we said that each letter in Hebrew has a numerical value. Just the word light in and of itself, the first thing to be created, God said, let there be light. Light equals Ein Sof. Just the word light equals Ein Sof, same numerical value. So infinity itself is like light, and light itself, their sense, has something infinite to it. And together, it creates something called Ohr Ein Sof, limitless, endless light. So the image here is of infinite light that encompasses everything and anything. And this is divinity before the creation. Divinity is called, God is called, he's not called God yet. He's called Ohr Ein Sof, infinite light. And it's a light that includes everything. There's no room for anything else, no darkness, no forgetfulness, no evil, and so on. Just infinite light. So this is the first concept in Kabbalah, which you won't see from, if you look deeply, you can feel that, wait, if there's a creator and he created creation, what happened before creation? Why does the first thing to be created within creation is light? So the idea is that before there was a world, a dark world, within which you pour light, there has to be an infinite source of light. And the infinite source of light is God in himself, or itself, or herself, and so on.
Would you prefer questions at the end?
If you ask now, then
so
it's okay.
How much of the Ohr Ein Sof is contained in the original Abraham teaching, or doesn't it appear there? It appears only from the Zohar onwards, actually. Yeah, in the book of Yetzirah, talks about within creation.
It's called the Book of Formation, and formation is not creation. Creation is after the world was created, this is how the world was formed. It was formed according to different structures, and it takes astrology and the Hebrew letters and combines them into one system. But the Book of Formation, by definition, talks about something after creation exists. But it wants to show you that within the world there are different forms. There are formulas and structures, hidden structures within creation, but it doesn't talk about before creation. The Zohar talks about it a little bit, and the Ari talks about it at length. So the more Kabbalah evolves, the further back they go. With Chassidut, the final stage, again, they don't talk about it, and they start talking about the soul, how we are connected to this. So the first three levels of Kabbalah go higher and deeper, and then the Baal Shem Tov wants to bring it back down to earth, to us, to people, regular people, and like I said, translating the mystical language into a psychological language, which we want to do in a minute, but to this.
Or is 307 or 407?
Or is 207. Reish is 200.
Okay. So 207.
And Aleph is 1, and Vav is 6. So it's 207.
The Ein Sof is
Also 207. And also Raz, which is secret, another word for secret. So the first question that comes out of this image of infinite light is a very simple question, but it's very hard to answer. And the answers are very beautiful. The question is, why does a being of infinite light need or want to create a world? A world that is not light, it's darkness, and it's not endless and limitless, it's limited and bounded and finite. It's not infinite, it's finite. Why would a perfect, infinite, endless being want to create something other than itself? And how can it even create something other than itself? There's no room for anything else. So the answer is divided into several answers, but they have something in common. Well, the first answer is we don't know. That's the first answer. The first answer is we don't know. And in Hebrew there's a word that kids like to use, and adults are very angry at them when they use it, and you know what the word is? Kacha. Kacha is what the English would say just so, right? There was an author, Rudyard Kipling, he lived here in India, and he wrote a book called Just So Stories. Why just so? No reason, no explanation, just so. So when you ask a kid in Israel or in Hebrew, you say, what did you do? They say kacha, and then the adults tell them, well, kacha is not an answer. Just so is not an answer. You have to give a better answer. But of course the adults do like to use the word when the kid asks them something. Why do you do this? Kacha. So kacha, this very simple word, 3 letters, is the acronym of the crown of all crowns. It really is the deepest answer. The kid that says just so, I don't know why I did it because, is saying that it really is something very, very deep. The deepest explanation for everything is kacha, is just so, is I don't know, is that's just the way it is. So that's the crown of all crowns. But still, after we put this on the table that we don't know, we can try to know. And several answers have been suggested. And I'll tell you the 4 answers. There are 4 general answers. I'll tell you what they are, but then we'll see what really they mean in a deeper way. So the first answer is that God, this infinite light, had a desire to dwell in the lower realms. He wanted to live in a place that's the farthest from him as possible. And in order to dwell in a lower realm, he needs to create realms that are dark and that do not acknowledge him, and then to dwell there. And why? It's a desire. You don't know why. He had a desire to dwell in the lower realms. Second explanation given, he wanted to be acknowledged. And in order to be acknowledged, you need for there to be someone else to acknowledge you, to get to know you without knowing you first. So you need to have someone else, that someone else needs to not know you and then to get to know you. And why? Again, we don't know, but we can say maybe if someone knows you, you know yourself better. Like when you explain something to someone else. So God wants to be heard or acknowledged. That's the second answer. Third answer, God is good. The word God in English comes from the word good. And when you're good, you want to benefit others. So God needs to create a world to benefit others. And finally, God is a king. God has a kingly nature to him. And there is no king without a people. So God needs to create a people or a world or humanity in order to lead it and raise it and advance it. The first two reasons are more about himself. The last two reasons are more about creation itself. Again, first reason, he wants to dwell in the lower realms. He wants to go out of the palace and live like a normal human being outside. Second reason, he wants to be acknowledged by others. He wants to be acknowledged or heard by others. Third reason, he wants to benefit others. Fourth reason, he wants to have a people to lead. He wants to be a leader. He needs, like a shepherd, he needs a flock. Now these are very weird answers because they have something very human about it. They're anthropomorphic to some degree, although we're not talking about God's hand or God's eye, but it's still anthropomorphic in the sense that he needs something and he lacks something. How can we understand this? How can we say that this infinite being of light, which seems to be totally impersonal, inhuman, meta-human, beyond anything humans can perceive because we don't have a true grasp of something infinite, how can we ascribe these four quite human motivations to this kind of infinite being? So again, the first reason is we don't know, but so that makes it soft. It softens these explanations. It doesn't make them so solid, but still they're given. So how can we understand them? And the explanation goes like this: the explanation is that when you're an infinite being, or a perfect being, by definition you're also imperfect. You lack one thing, one very crucial thing, because you're perfect. You lack imperfection. You don't know what imperfection feels like. You don't know what it's like not to be perfect. You don't know what it's like to lack something. You don't know what it's like to need something. You don't know what it's like to not know something. And so being perfect is in and of itself, by definition, has some sort of imperfection to it. And that imperfection being not knowing what imperfection is. Both. In Hebrew it's the same word. Shalem. Yeah, so we can say the same thing. God is complete. Because he's complete, he's also incomplete because he lacks incompleteness. Or the feeling, the longing, the sense of being incomplete. So something infinite he doesn't have. If you're boundless, you don't have bounds. You're boundless. If you're infinite, you don't have an end. You're infinite. If you're without imperfection or without, how do you say the word? Immaculate. If you're immaculate, you also don't have the feeling of being, of not being full. Thank you very much. תודה רבה.
שפע ברכה והכל.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל יהיה בדברו.
So complete and perfect is the same root meaning, or actually the same meaning?
No, it is the same root with different words. Perfect. The root is shalem. Shalem is whole. Mushlam is perfect. But it's a variety in the same. Mushlam means complete or whole. Sorry?
For Shiva, Shiva is more than perfect.
Shiva in Hinduism?
Yes.
The meaning of the word?
No, not the meaning of the word. He uses drum. The word is more than perfect.
Drum is more than perfect?
Yeah, because I like the...
So this is very similar, because more than perfect means there's something more than perfect. But here the answer would be that more than perfect is imperfect. Or more than perfect would be both perfect and imperfect. And another word we can put into this is that if you only know what perfectness is, then you don't know imperfect. There's another thing you don't know, which is perfecting. Perfecting is the movement from the imperfect to the perfect. You're imperfect, you long to be perfect, and you strive towards perfectness. And this is something that the perfect being does not understand or cannot experience. What is it like to constantly perfect yourself? Which is to strive for higher perfection. Because he's perfect already. So more than perfect in the Jewish Kabbalistic sense would be less than perfect. And then you're more than perfect. So this is something very, very, very interesting to ponder. And we can say that also in our lives. If we only have the sense of bliss, of restfulness, if we only have the sense of peacefulness, of wholeness, of being complete, being at one, we're also very much incomplete. We lack the feeling of being incomplete, of not being whole, of being broken, of being half of something else. And according to Judaism, this is the ultimate perfection. The ultimate perfection is to have a feeling of peacefulness and also a feeling of restlessness. To feel at one with things and also to feel not at one with things, to feel far away from things. And one of the greatest Kabbalists, his name was Abu Lafia, he said that wholeness, he called it the true wholeness, is being a whole and a half. A whole and a half. And I like to say people are very much infatuated with the Chinese symbol of the yin and the yang, because it's a very hypnotic symbol. And it seems to contain everything about the universe. There's black and white, and they complement one another, and they balance one another, and there's a black within the white, and a white within the black. But I always feel that it's too perfect, it's too balanced, it's too much whole. And the notion of being a whole and a half is having a yin and a yang, and then another yin, without the yang. And it's not symmetrical, it's not, one part of it is symmetrical, but the other part is, wait, where's the other half? And you want it, and it's imbalanced, and gives you a feeling of this, it's asymmetrical. There's asymmetry and symmetry also. So we'll just repeat for Nicole.
It's okay.
No, it's good for everyone, for me also. I said in one thing, that we asked that if God is a perfect, infinite being, why would he need to create something other than itself, or create a world, or why does he need anything? And we gave 4 answers, but what all these 4 answers have in common is that when you're a perfect being, then by definition, in and of itself, you're also imperfect. You lack the experience of imperfection. So being perfect is, when one is perfect, you immediately feel that you lack something. And you lack what it's like not to be perfect, what it's like to need something, to lack something, to long for something, and to want to be more perfect than what you are. So perfect is imperfect, and only being both perfect and imperfect, that's a higher order of perfection. So God wants to evolve from a lower form of perfection to a higher form of perfection, which includes both perfection and imperfection. And so the world, the creation, is God experiencing imperfection. And God experienced what it's like not to have something and to long for it and then to reach it. There's a verse in Ecclesiastes one of the books of wisdom written by King Solomon, wisest of all men. And one of the verses there that appears to be very banal, very trivial, says, I found that wisdom is superior to ignorance as light is superior to darkness. Okay. That's a very nice thing to know, that wisdom is superior to ignorance as light is superior to darkness. But the Kabbalistic, the Kabbalists made a twist on this verse, and they read it in a little bit different way. In Hebrew, it says, light is greater than, or has an advantage over darkness, can also be read as light from darkness. So greater than, like the word then, greater, light is greater than darkness can be read instead of then darkness, from darkness, or of darkness. So then the verse is read in a completely new way. Obviously light is greater than darkness, or better than darkness. But here the verse is read as comparing two forms of light, and as meaning light that comes from darkness is greater than simple light. Light is good, light is better than darkness, light is knowing things, understanding things, seeing things, being connected to things, perceiving them. And this is wonderful, and God was infinite light. He knew everything there is to know. It's infinite wisdom, it's all of everything. But only יתרון האור מן החושך. ראיתי יתרון לחוכמה מן הסכלות כיתרון האור מן החושך. מן החושך. Min is more than, but also from. So, God is all light and God knows everything, but there is another form of greater kind of light, and that is the light that comes out of darkness. That is the light of first not knowing something, or having a feeling of unhappiness, a crisis, not understanding something, being unhappy, being in the dark regarding something. And then suddenly when you go through the darkness, and you don't run away from the darkness, and you stare into it, and you cross it, and you find lights buried within the darkness like a diamond buried within a mine, then that diamond shines in a much greater light than the diamonds you had at home. Not only because you didn't have it before and then you had it, but also because the best diamonds, they're not to be found at your home where it's light. They're found in the mine. They're the diamonds that haven't been dug up yet. They're bigger and they're greater, they're of greater light. So we can see this in our lives. When there are things that we're happy or we're content about. And then if we reach a crisis, we reach an illness, God forbid, or an economical difficulty, or someone being lost, and then we go through it and we overcome it, and we learn something from it, what we have learned by virtue of falling, by virtue of failing, by virtue of dealing with something that's more difficult than we thought we could confront, then it's like going into a mine and digging up this greater light that's hidden there. And this is the light that God needs a world in order to experience, because this is the light of perfecting, not of perfection. It's the light of moving from not knowing to knowing, from being small to being big, from being limited to acquiring something, from having a difficulty and overcoming the difficulty, from having a heart that's closed to opening the heart and letting something new go into it. And so this kind of light God needs to have, and it's okay to say about God that He needs. It's not taking away His perfection. It only shows that He's so perfect that He doesn't have this imperfection. Now He needs this imperfection in order to experience this kind of new or superior or greater or one more wondrous light that can only be acquired if you know what darkness is. So this is what all these answers have in common. Let's go over them again. So the first answer is he wants to dwell in the lower realms. What does it mean? It means that he wants to dwell in a place that's far away from him. It's not godly at all. There needs to be a non-godly and non-divine world, a world that appears to be very materialistic and very earthly. And then suddenly this place would say, God, come and dwell within us. We're inviting you to dwell in this place which is the least holy place there is, and you make it holy, and then suddenly the unholy becomes holy, and the earthly becomes divine, and this is the first reason he wants to dwell. He wants to feel what it's like not to be somewhere and then to be longed for and then to be there. And this is the ultimate purpose of creation, according to Kabbalah and Judaism, is we want to make this world a dwelling place for God. We want him to feel at home in this world. Right now he can't feel at home. There's too much wars and evil and insincerity and just people leading out their regular earthly lives and not remembering who they are, where they came from, that they have divine souls. And the more the world remembers, the more the world becomes a dwelling place for God.
I think that the most interesting thing is that God needs us.
Yeah, so.
Put himself, like he needs us to bring the light here to his world.
Yeah. So it's both us needing him and him needing us to need him, and there are these two needs, they have a dialogue with each other. Through us he experienced the need to dwell, and of course he needs us to have this need. Second reason, he wants to be acknowledged or heard. So again, he wants his light to shine into a place where it's not there yet. And then he would be recognized or heard, and everything that is embedded within him would suddenly... Infinity is something very simple, but this infinity contains an infinite amount of details. For the details to come out, for the beauty and the wisdom of it to come out, you need to have this empty space, and then this place hears you. It's like your echo chamber. And the world is the echo chamber of God. And so God can pour his light into the world, and then all his colors and all his details and all of his wisdom and all of his beauty can be revealed. God wants to benefit others. There needs to be others in order to benefit, and they experience the feeling of growing out of a bad situation into a better situation. And God wants the people to be their king, is again, he wants people that he can not only teach and benefit, but also raise them from being small to being great. This is what a king wants, or any kind of leader or shepherd. He wants to raise his flock.
This is like a kind of experiment.
It's a kind of experiment, and it's a kind of play. One of the Kabbalists said that all these explanations end up saying that God is playing within his private rooms. And you can say that the game, Einstein said that God does not play dice with the universe. And then Woody Allen in one of the movies answered, that's right, he plays hide and seek. So I don't know if Woody Allen knew this or not, or maybe it was his Jewish roots, or I don't know where it came from, but this is the Kabbalistic answer, that God is playing hide and seek. He hides, and he wants us to seek him. There's a story in Chabad, in the Hasidic branch that I belong to, that the first rabbi, the rabbi of Chabad, his grandson came crying. And he asked him, why are you crying? He says, I played hide and seek with my friends, and I hid. And I waited and waited, nobody came looking for me. And then I came out and they all left. So he doesn't want to be found, but in a way he wants to be found. This is why he was crying, that nobody was looking for him. And this is the game of hide and seek. You hide, but it would be the most insulting thing in the world if nobody is looking for you. And then he told him, the grandfather told him, this is exactly what God feels like. He's hiding and he's crying, and we're not looking for him. So it's a kind of game, and it's a kind of experiment, and it's a kind of exploration. It's a kind of self-exploration within divinity. Now we said there's infinite light, And we asked, where can God create the world? If everything is God, and God is everything, and there's no room for anything else. And here comes the second most important Kabbalistic concept. And it goes like this. God chose a point within the infinite light, and then he diminished himself. But here, the diminishment is that he pushed away the infinite light outwards. He diminished the light, not like this, when you diminish something, but like this. And he opened up a space within the infinite light. So this is metaphorical and symbolic, but we have to see what it means. He diminishes the light, he pushes away the light in all directions, and he expands the point into a vacant space. This is how it's called, the vacant space. So this is the infinite light, and then God takes a point, and we'll say something about this point in a minute, and then he expands it and creates a dark space, a vacant space. Darkness is the lack of light. And he creates a dark space within the infinite light, but not only does he do it, but something very paradoxical is said about this, that the point is the central point of the infinity, which of course has no meaning. Because an infinite plane or an infinite space does not have a center. Or you can say every point is the center. But still, here, according to Kabbalah, there is an infinite light, but it has a center. There's something about this game between perfection and imperfection, and being whole and then realizing you're not whole because you're whole, that goes together with this combination of infinity and center. When you think about an infinite God, you also think about an indifferent God. If God is everywhere equally, God is also nowhere. There's a famous Buddhist story about a monk who goes and sees another monk who pees on the sculpture of the Buddha. And he tells him, how can you do this? And the other monk that was peeing says, well, show me a place where the Buddha cannot be found and I'll do it there. And it's a very nice story because it says, you don't think that it's the idol, it's not the idol, it's beyond the idol, it's everywhere. But let's go one more step. If this kind of God is everywhere equally, then everything is holy, but also you can pee everywhere. And this is not what Judaism wants. Judaism would agree that God is not to be found within one statue or another. This is one of the first things that Abraham wanted to teach everyone else. But then when it came to Moses and Moses received the Torah, God told him, I want you to build me a tabernacle, a dwelling place, a structure. And Moses immediately told him, but God, you're everywhere. This is a story, it's outside of the Torah, it's in the oral tradition. But you're everywhere. It says in the prophets, you're everywhere, you're to be found everywhere. How can you? And he says, yes, I know. When you think that I'm only everywhere, that I'm only infinite, and that I'm only boundless, and that I'm only indifferent to everything, this is a human concept of divinity. You think I'm everything you're not. You think because you need one home, and then you have inside the home and outside the home, and you have a place that you like and a place that you don't like, and you have a place that's yours and a place that's not yours, and you have far from home and close to home, then you think I'm the opposite of that. And I am, but I'm not only the opposite of that, I'm also the opposite of this opposite, and I'm also a bit like you. Because I'm infinite, and because I want to be both infinite and finite, I also want to be meta-human and human. I want to be beyond everything, and I want to... So, the God is everywhere, God is infinite, but God has a central point. He's not indifferent. And he cares about this more than about everything else. He cares about this world because he created it in the central point. This world is more of interest to him than all the infinite light that's beyond it in infinite directions, beyond this whiteboard. He doesn't want us to run away from this world. He doesn't want us to escape it. It's not an illusion. It's something very real. And he wants to dwell in this world. That's what interests him. He knows what infinity is like. He doesn't need us to teach him he needs us to teach him what is it like to bring the infinite light into the finite space of this world.
Can I use this for atheism?
Sorry?
And mysticism. So they say there is no God, like the Hindus say then.
What is the full sentence? What is
because you say it's not an illusion.
Yeah.
It's a concept. It's very close to all the things what we say religions are. And also we have the understanding that all religions are just the fingers of one hand.
All religions are just
like the fingers of one hand.
The fingers of one hand.
So, and then we have the concept of mysticism in general. Okay, if it is more easy than to say there is no God. And this is what also a black spot then is in the center of a light anyway, if it is doubled like this, because you repeat the process like more than before. You have the black spot, you create something around, and then you fill this as black spot, and then you have again outside of this black. So the thing is if you say light without end, you say in the beginning there is nothing, is then the normal beginning. Then we have darkness, then we have light.
I feel like I have to sit down with you after the class and understand what you're saying. It's hard for me to understand.
I understand the principle.
Okay. And also we're in the middle of something.
It's like dualism, it's like shamanism. I know shamanism very well. In shamanism you have Mother Earth, Father, Son. You have always duality.
Mm-hmm.
There is no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You have Father, Son. So concept like this, just...
Yeah, so here, by the way, what we just created, this is duality. This is the beginning of duality. The beginning of duality is this notion of diminishment and the creating of the, so to speak, empty space or vacant space. And now we have a duality. Now we have light and darkness. We have above and below. Below is within the space and above is beyond it. And we have so let's just write down the term. The term is called, in Hebrew, diminishment means Tzimtzum. If you've seen the movie The Life of Pi, or read the book, the boat, for some reason, takes place on a tiny boat. It's called the Tzimtzum. So I don't know what he meant by it, but he took it from the Kabbalistic expression. And Tzimtzum means diminishment. And again, diminishment here means taking the light sideways in order to create this black or empty space. The word in Hebrew for darkness, or dark, the root for dark, when you reverse the order of the letters, it becomes forgetting. Darkness and forgetfulness are cognate. Light is like remembering, darkness is like forgetting. And this is a space that forgot, so to speak, that it's divine. Now, this is the beginning of duality, but there's also a duality to how this is understood. Because there's a verse that says, I, God, have not changed. It's in one of the books of the prophets, in Malachi. He says, I, God, have not changed. And the Kabbalists explain that really, I said before, it's not an illusion, but now I want to bracket that saying. On one hand, this is something very real. When you live within this world, then the darkness is very real. A world has been created, a space has been created, and you don't see divinity. And this is a true experience, not an illusory experience, it's a true experience. On the other hand, from God's perspective, all this is still infinite light. And the phrase is that the Tzimtzum should not be understood literally. It's not a literal diminishment. It's only diminishment from the point of view of someone within this space. And if you're outside the space, you see it's all divinity. It's a bit like a one-sided mirror. Let's say you're in a room and there's a whole wall that is a one-sided mirror. The mirror is facing you. You feel like you're in a very small room because one wall is just this one big mirror. But actually, the room is much bigger. And if you would stand on the other side of the mirror, you would see that the room is bigger, and you would see it contains both the other side of it and this side of it, because you see everything. So we can say that this world is surrounded by a one-sided mirror. It appears to be closed. It appears not to be transparent. The light appears not to come in, or hardly to come in. In a minute, we'll see how the light comes in. But from God's point of view, it's all infinite. So what is more true, monism or dualism? We began with infinite light, that's monism. There's one thing, there's one light, one divinity. And from one perspective, that is still the case. Just like many religions feel that this world is an illusion and there's one reality and it's hidden and you should connect to this reality. On the other hand, dualism is also absolutely true, just like monism is. There is also darkness and light, and this world and beyond it, and creator and creation. And in a well-balanced religious life, one should experience both these truths. There should be a movement of going up and reconnecting to the light, and there should be another movement of going back down again and reconnecting with this reality, with the dualistic nature of this world. Now there is something in between these two notions, and this is one of the most beautiful images. So now we had an infinite light. Let's write down what all these means. This is called this is called the surrounding light. Surrounding light around the vacant space. This is called the vacant space. But there's also another thing going on here, which is called Reshimu. Reshimu means residue. When you take a bottle of wine or perfume and you empty it, then it's no longer there, but you can still smell it. There's a residue of the wine or the perfume within the bottle, and the smell is still there. So the idea is all this vacant space still smells like God. The smell of God is everywhere, and this is what can spark the memory that it's all really divinity also here. That it's both an empty space and a divine space. So within this light, everywhere in it, within the space, everywhere in the space, there's also this residue, Reshimu, an impression. That's the exact translation. It's not residue, but impression. Within the space, there's an impression or a fragrance or a residue or a remainder of God's revealed presence. Again, it's still all divinity, but divinity is hidden within this space.
It's surrounded by Ohr
Ohr Sovev. Sovev Kol Almin, surrounds all worlds. Mekif is when we talk about the soul, has Mekif and Pnimi, but the world has Sovev and Memale.
What was the other word for residual surrounding?
Impression. You leave an impression. Someone came and went, but he left an impression. He impressed something like a signature. The final stage of this process, and then we have something complete that we can sum up the day with, is that after the diminishment and the residual light entrenched or drenched within this darkness, God begins to create the world within. This is still not the world, this is He set the stage, so to speak. This is just a space. And then He takes a line of light, and He very gradually and tenderly takes this line into the world, like this. And actually goes beyond the center, it goes almost all the way down. And He takes this one line of light. He has an infinite light, but He knows that too much light would break the vessel. So He takes one, He chooses. This is another kind of diminishment, but not like this, but like this. You have all these things to say, but you choose just one line of light, and then you roll down that light, that line, that rope into the world, and with this He starts creating the worlds, not just the world, the many, many worlds. Each world is like a circle, and then it goes further down, there's a smaller circle, and it goes further down, there are smaller and smaller circles. Each one is a lower world. Right? So He goes down, let's do it again here without all this black. That we have this vacant space, and the light goes down and creates a world. The world is like this. It's a very high world, it's very close to the surrounding light. Then it goes further down and creates another world. And further down creates another world. And so on. An infinite amount of worlds. And we dwell in the lowest of worlds. In the most material world, in the world is called the world of action. We'll talk about the worlds later on. The world of physical action, it's even more. There's a line of light, it's still here somewhere. It connects all the worlds like a sort of elevator. This is where the worlds were created from. And this is also the passageway from one world to a higher world in terms of consciousness. So generally speaking, we have 3 stages to creation. We have the infinite light, we have the diminishment, which includes the impression or the residue, and then we have the line of light, which creates the world. This line of light would not have been able to create the world if it weren't for the residue of divine light within the empty space, because it needs something to echo it. It needs to meet with something that is similar to it, and then when they meet, a world is created. From the meeting of, right, within this diminishment, we also have the residue of light. So when the line of light and the residue meet, a world is created, and then further down, there's another residue, and they meet, they create more worlds. Now let's say, we said that Chassidut wants to translate all this into psychology. So we can say something very simple about a psychological process and the process of growth. It is said that a child, before they are born, they know everything. The story in the Talmud is that the baby in the womb sits by the light of the candle with an angel, and he teaches him the entirety of the Torah, which is really the entirety of divine truth. But then the moment the baby is born, they forget. So before the baby is born, the soul is, so to speak, embedded within the infinite light. We know everything. We knew everything once. We were part of this divine light. But then, when we're born, it pours out of us. We're emptied. And we can say that this empty space is like the space of within our skull. This round, vacant space is our own skull, our own consciousness, so to speak. And then but still, there's a residue, there's an impression. If we would hear truth, we would identify it. And then the line of light is divine truth that is revealed, and we meet it, and it touches, and it awakens the residue, and suddenly a kind of world is formed within our skull at the beginning of an understanding of something. Of course, we climb from the lower circle to the upper circle. The worlds were created from first the higher world and then the lower world. For us, it's the opposite. Every time we integrate more light, then we go up a world, not the other way around. We can also say that these three stages are stages of how we should approach the world. At first, we should love everything and everyone. Infinite light. God loved everything. There's no central point. I'm not in the center. No one is in the center. Everyone is beautiful. Everyone is full of light. Everything is full of light. But if we stay in this stage, some very bad things can happen. If we love everyone, there are some bad people. It's not okay to just love them and that's it, and they need to be stopped if they're doing bad things, and you could get hurt, and that's not how the world is like. You see it as it was before it was created. That's like the first thing to do when you get up in the morning, when you grow up, and you say, first let's see the light everywhere. But then the diminishment is you want to take yourself to the side. You want to give people room. If you love someone, you can choke them with your hug. And if you don't see them for who they are. You don't give them room. When you love, it could be that someone loves everything, but they're also in love with themselves, and they don't differentiate. The diminishment is differentiating. Let's differentiate. Let's give you room. Let's see who you are. God wants to create a world that is not a marionette that He controls. What's the point if it's a marionette? He wants to give us room to evolve, to think, to choose wrongly, to choose rightly. He wants us to be real people who then remember Him and want to be with Him because they choose to. So we should also give room to other people and see them for who they are and see the differences between people. Loving everyone also makes everyone the same. So you first tell yourself, I want to love everyone, but then you want to say to yourself, but not everyone is the same, not everything is the same. Not all religions are the same, not all people are the same, not all stories are the same, things are different. You need to give the world room, you need to put yourself in the side a little bit. And then you create an empty space within you, and then you can listen to other people. And then you can see what you can learn from them, what they can learn from you. You don't want to have blind love for everything. Love is blind, that's okay, but then it also needs to see. And the diminishment is seeing the world as it is right now, black, dark. Seeing people for who they are. Right now, they have the potential to be connected to the infinite light, but right now they're not, and I'm not either. And then after you make these two things, you can reach out to people gently with the line of light. And you can approach them, and you can touch them, and you can touch their hearts, and they can touch your heart, and the divine light can go into you and touch you as well. But that is a very gradual process, and it requires you to let go of the world and not see it as something, not to be drunk with love for it. You need to be sober. That's the diminishment. It's being sober. One last example of what we can do with this. This is a kind of meditation. The meditation is that we close our eyes and we imagine the world to be perfect. And we remind ourselves that everything is good. Because really beneath the Tzimtzum, the diminishment, God's light is everywhere. But then, if we want to evolve and expand and grow, we need to imagine also that we're opening up a space of simple faith that can help us navigate through the darkness of the world. We don't know. Faith is when we don't know things. When we know things, we don't need to believe in them. So we have to open up the space. Much of Oriental or Eastern meditation has to be about emptying your mind. Here, this corresponds to the second stage. When you empty your mind, you create a space of emptiness, of not knowing. I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know what the future will bring. I don't know how I'm going to cope with all kinds of things. But I have faith. I have faith that things that I don't know will help me deal with what I don't know. And then begins the final stage, which in Hebrew is called bitachon, it's confidence, is when you say, okay, now that there's this empty space, I want to pull down a line of meaning, like a rope that would help me, that would carry me out of this empty space, or light up this empty space, like a candle, or like a... I want to pull it down into this world. I want to pull it down. I want to make this world, I want to light up this emptiness. I want to fill the emptiness. First it's emptying, then it's filling it. It's filling it with understanding, with decisions, with resolutions. And then you decide, then you have a road, then you have a trajectory. Then you want to go down the trajectory and you become a more responsible person. But it requires the first two stages. If you just begin with where you are and you say, this is my trajectory, I want to go there, you're not connected to something deeper within you, which is being also connected to what you don't know, to the darkness, where you need faith before the confidence. So this is the first class of Introduction to Kabbalah. And we have three things that give us a little bit of impression of the picture of Kabbalah. Later on we're going to go into more details. We're going to learn about two very primordial worlds, and then about more worlds. There are 4 general worlds within these circles. Worlds, yeah. And all of these concepts can be used in different aspects of our lives. And then we want to go a little bit into the very famous Sefirot system that's in the poster, and learn what they are and how they interact with one another. People are familiar with similar concepts from other traditions, but this one has unique because it has this zigzag motion through it, and what it means and what each level means. So it's only four meetings, but we'll try to touch upon the most basic concept. But here I wanted to present this notion of the infinite light, the Tzimtzum, diminishment, and then the line of light, and give these 3 examples of how we can implement it. And if you have questions, I'd love to hear them.